The desert wind kicked up sand across the training range as Chief Petty Officer Marcus "Tank" Rodriguez walked the firing line. 23 years in the Navy SEALs had taught him to notice everything. The way a recruit held their weapon, how they breathed before taking a shot, whether their stance showed confidence or fear. Today, something was different. At Station 12, a figure in desert camouflage lay prone behind a Barrett M82A1 .50 caliber sniper rifle. The massive weapon, weighing nearly 30 pounds, could punch through engine blocks and take down targets at distances exceeding a mile. Most recruits struggled with its brutal recoil and thunderous report. This shooter was different. The figure's grip was perfect. Left hand supporting the stock, right hand positioned with surgical precision on the pistol grip. The body position showed textbook form that Tank had seen maybe twice in his entire career. Whoever this was had serious training. Next shooter, engage target at 800 meters, Tank called out. The Barrett erupted with its characteristic boom that made everyone on the range flinch, everyone except the shooter. Through his binoculars, Tank watched the target downrange. Dead center, perfect shot again. 1,000 meters, another thunderclap, another perfect hit. Tank walked closer, his boots crunching on the gravel. The shooter wore a standard-issue helmet and protective gear, face obscured by equipment. But something about the build, the way they moved, made Tank pause. "Remove your helmet and eye pro," he ordered. The figure sat up slowly, pulling off the Kevlar helmet. Long auburn hair spilled out, and when the protective glasses came off, Tank found himself looking into sharp green eyes that belonged to a woman who couldn't have been more than 25. Petty Officer Second Class Sarah Chen. "Chief," she said, her voice steady and professional. Tank had seen the name on the roster but hadn't paid much attention. Female snipers were rare in the teams, though not unheard of anymore. What caught his attention wasn't her gender. It was the way she handled that rifle like she'd been born with it in her hands. "Where'd you learn to shoot like that, Chen?" "Montana, Chief. My grandfather taught me." Tank nodded but said nothing. There was more to this story. Nobody shot like that just from hunting with Grandpa. The way she worked the bolt, the smooth reload, the complete absence of flinch when that massive rifle went off. This was someone with serious trigger time. "Pack it up. Report to my office at 1400 hours." Chen nodded and began breaking down the Barrett with the same fluid efficiency she'd shown while shooting. Tank watched her work, his mind racing. In 2 decades of training snipers, he'd developed an eye for natural talent versus learned skill. Chen had both in spades. Back in his office, Tank pulled up Chen's personnel file on his computer. The basic information was standard enough. Born in Billings, Montana. Father deceased, mother remarried. Joined the Navy at 18. Went straight into special operations training. High marks across the board. But something felt incomplete about the record. There was a knock at his door at exactly 1400 hours. "Enter." Chen stepped in and stood at attention. "Petty Officer Chen reporting as ordered, Chief." "At ease." "Sit down." Tank leaned back in his chair and studied her. "I've been training snipers for 15 years, Chen. I've seen maybe 3 people handle a Barrett the way you did today. 2 of them were instructors with 20 years experience. The third was a former Marine Scout sniper who'd done 4 tours in Afghanistan." Chen remained silent, her expression neutral. "So I'm going to ask you again, where did you really learn to shoot like that?" For a moment, Chen's professional mask slipped, and Tank saw something else in her eyes. "Pain, maybe, or loss. My father was Army Special Forces, Chief. Before he died, he taught me everything he knew about long-range shooting. Said it might save my life someday." "When did he die?" "When I was 16. Killed in action in Syria. Officially, he was never there." Tank felt the pieces clicking into place. A Special Forces father who'd trained his daughter in advanced marksmanship. That explained the professional level skills he'd witnessed. "I'm sorry for your loss." "Thank you." "Chief." Tank opened his desk drawer and pulled out a folder marked Classified. Inside were training records from advanced sniper courses, combat deployment reports, and kill confirmations, records that most people would never see. "Chen, I'm going to ask you something, and I want you to think carefully before you answer. Have you ever been in combat?" The question hung in the air like smoke. Chen's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly, and Tank knew he'd hit something. "I joined the Navy straight out of high school, Chief. This is my first assignment." It was a non-answer, and they both knew it. Tank had been around special operations long enough to recognize when someone was dancing around classified information. The way Chen held herself, the confidence in her shooting, the complete lack of intimidation around experienced operators, none of it matched someone fresh out of training. Chen, I need you to understand something. In 2 weeks, my sniper section is deploying to Syria. We're going to be supporting joint operations in some very dangerous territory. I need to know exactly what kind of operator I'm dealing with. Chen was quiet for a long moment, staring at a point on the wall behind Tank's head. Chief, some things aren't in the official records for a reason, but I can promise you this. When we deploy, I'll do whatever it takes to bring everyone home. Tank closed the folder and locked it back in his drawer. Whatever Chen's story was, he'd get the truth eventually. For now, he had a feeling that his sniper section had just gotten a lot more dangerous. Dismissed. Be ready for advanced training tomorrow at 0600. As Chen left his office, Tank made a mental note to dig deeper into her background. Something told him that Petty Officer Sarah Chen was going to be full of surprises. That evening, Tank sat in his quarters with a secure laptop and a cup of black coffee that had gone cold hours ago. The base was quiet, except for the distant hum of generators and the occasional patrol walking by his window. He'd been digging into Sarah Chen's background for 3 hours, and what he was finding didn't add up. Her official Navy record showed she'd completed basic training at Great Lakes, then went straight to Naval Special Warfare training in Coronado, standard progression for someone entering the SEAL support community. But Tank had made some calls to old contacts and the pieces weren't fitting together. According to her instructors at Coronado, Chen had shown up already knowing things that took most recruits months to learn. Advanced fieldcraft, weapons handling that went beyond basic training, and a situational awareness that belonged to someone with combat experience. When pressed for details, one instructor had simply said, "That girl's got some kind of ghost in her past." Tank picked up his secure phone and dialed a number he hadn't used in 2 years. Johnson. Mike, it's Tank. I need a favor. Lieutenant Colonel Mike Johnson had been Tank's counterpart in Army Special Forces for over a decade. If anyone could shed light on Chen's background, it would be him. What do you need? I've got a sailor named Sarah Chen. Claims her father was SF, killed in Syria about 9 years ago. I need to know what the real story is. There was a long pause on the other end of the line. Tank, why are you asking about this? Because this woman can shoot like she's been doing it professionally for years, and her official record doesn't match her skills. Another pause. Meet me tomorrow at the Anchor Bar in town. Come alone and don't bring any recording devices. The line went dead. Tank stared at the phone, his suspicions confirmed. There was definitely more to Sarah Chen's story. The next morning's training session was an eye-opener. Tank had set up a complex shooting course that combined long-range precision with close-quarters combat scenarios. The kind of training that separated the professionals from the wannabes. Chen moved through the course like water flowing downhill. Her transitions from the sniper rifle to her sidearm were seamless. Her target identification was instantaneous. Most impressive was her ability to make split-second decisions under pressure, a skill that couldn't be taught in any classroom. Chen. Hold up, Tank called as she finished the course with the best time he'd seen in months. Where did you learn close-quarters combat? Montana's a dangerous place, Chief, lots of wildlife. Tank almost smiled despite himself. Chen was sticking to her cover story, but her sense of humor was showing through. Right. Mountain lions are known for their tactical awareness. You'd be surprised, Chief. That afternoon, Tank drove into town for his meeting with Johnson. The Anchor Bar was a dive that catered to off-duty military personnel. The kind of place where conversations stayed private and nobody asked too many questions. Johnson was already there, nursing a beer and looking like he'd aged 5 years since Tank had last seen him. The stress lines around his eyes spoke of too many classified operations and too many difficult decisions. You look like hell, Mike. Occupational hazard. Let's take a booth in the back. They settled into a corner where they could see the entire bar but couldn't be overheard. Johnson took a long pull from his beer before speaking. Sarah Chen, born Sarah Michelle Kowalski in Billings, Montana. Father was Master Sergeant David Kowalski, Army Special Forces. Mother was Lisa Chen, who remarried after David was killed. So far that matches what she told me. Here's where it gets interesting. David Kowalski didn't just teach his daughter to shoot. He taught her everything. Survival, tactics, weapons systems, tradecraft. Guy was convinced that the world was getting more dangerous and his daughter needed to be able to protect herself. Tank nodded. It wasn't unusual for SF operators to train their families in basic self-defense, but it sounded like Kowalski had gone much further than most. When Sarah was 15, David was deployed to Syria on a classified mission. Black operation, no official record. His team was compromised and everyone was killed except for one survivor. Johnson paused, his eyes meeting Tank's across the table. Sarah was 17 when she disappeared for 6 months. Officially, she was visiting relatives in Oregon. Unofficially, she was in Syria with a private military contractor, trying to find out what happened to her father. Tank felt his blood run cold. A 17-year-old girl went to Syria? Not just any 17-year-old. One who'd been trained by a special forces operator since she could walk. The contractor who brought her in was an old friend of her father's. Guy named Richards who ran a small outfit doing intelligence work for the CIA. What happened in Syria? Johnson finished his beer and signaled for another. That's where it gets classified above my pay grade. All I know is that Sarah spent 6 months in country, and when she came back she joined the Navy under her stepfather's name. Her original identity was scrubbed from most databases. Tank was quiet for a long moment processing the information. A teenage girl with advanced military training, deployed to a war zone to investigate her father's death. It explained everything about Chen's skills and nothing about what she'd actually done there. Mike, I need to know what happened in Syria. My team is deploying there in 2 weeks, and if Chen has history in the area, I need to know about it. Johnson reached into his jacket and pulled out a sealed envelope. Everything I can legally share is in there. The rest, well, let's just say your petty officer Chen has some very interesting friends in the intelligence community. Tank took the envelope but didn't open it. Is she dangerous? To her enemies? Absolutely. To her teammates? Johnson shrugged. That depends on whether you can earn her trust. Sarah Chen has been betrayed by people she should have been able to count on. She's not quick to let people get close. What about her kill record? Johnson's expression grew serious. Tank, some questions are better left unasked. What I will tell you is that when your team deploys, you're going to have one of the most capable operators I've ever heard of watching your back. Just make sure you deserve it. As Tank drove back to base, his mind was racing. Sarah Chen wasn't just a skilled shooter. She was a ghost with a classified past and connections to the intelligence community. In 2 weeks, he'd be taking her into the same country where she'd lost her father and apparently made some enemies. The question was, would Sarah Chen be an asset or a liability when they crossed into Syria? Tank had a feeling he was about to find out the hard way. Tank waited until the barracks were quiet before opening Johnson's envelope. Inside were photocopied pages from classified reports, surveillance photos, and a handwritten note that simply said burn after reading. What he found made his hands shake. The first document was a CIA field report from Syria, dated 8 years ago. Sarah Kowalski, Chen's real name, had been classified as a high-value intelligence asset during her 6-month deployment. She hadn't just been looking for her father. She'd been hunting the people who killed him. The surveillance photos showed a young woman who barely looked old enough for high school, but the reports painted a different picture. Working with a private military contractor called Blackwater Solutions, she'd infiltrated a terrorist cell responsible for ambushing her father's special forces team. The operation had taken 4 months of careful planning and had resulted in the elimination of 12 high-priority targets. Tank studied one particular photo showing Sarah at a market in Damascus, her face obscured by a headscarf but her eyes clearly visible. Those same green eyes he'd looked into yesterday, but 8 years younger and filled with cold determination. The final document made Tank's stomach drop. A kill confirmation sheet with 12 names, 12 photos, and 12 dates. At the bottom, in neat handwriting, confirmed kills, S. Kowalski, asset designation, ghost, 12 kills. At 17 years old, Tank burned the documents in his sink, watching the paper curl and blacken as the weight of what he'd learned settled on his shoulders. Sarah Chen wasn't just a skilled operator. She was a killer who'd been forged in the fires of personal loss and tempered by professional revenge. The next morning, Tank found Chen on the range before dawn, working through shooting drills with mechanical precision. Each shot from her Barrett was perfectly placed, the rhythm as steady as a metronome. She didn't acknowledge his presence, but Tank knew she'd heard him approaching. Couldn't sleep? Sleep's overrated, Chief. Tank watched her fire 3 more rounds, each one dead center at 1,200 meters. Chen, we need to talk. She safed her weapon and turned to face him. In the early morning light, she looked younger than her 25 years, but her eyes held the weight of someone who'd seen too much. What about, Chief? Syria, your father. What really happened over there? Chen's expression didn't change, but Tank caught the slight tension in her shoulders. My father was killed in action. That's all there is to know. I know about Blackwater Solutions. I know about Damascus. And I know about 12 confirmed kills. For a long moment, Chen just stared at him. Then slowly she began breaking down her rifle, with the same mechanical precision she'd shown while shooting. Then you know why I can't let anyone else die because of bad intelligence. Tell me what happened. Chen was quiet for several minutes, working on her weapon with practiced efficiency. When she finally spoke, her voice was steady but distant. My father's team was set up. Someone sold them out to a terrorist cell led by a man named Hassan al-Rashid. The ambush was perfectly planned. They knew exactly where my father's team would be and when they'd be there. She paused to clean the bolt of her rifle. The official investigation went nowhere. Too classified, too politically sensitive. So I found someone who could get me into Syria to look for answers. Richards, you've done your homework. Chen reassembled her rifle without looking at the parts. Jim Richards was my father's friend and my best chance at getting the truth. He brought me in as a contract intelligence analyst. Tank sat down on a nearby equipment box. 17 years old in Syria. That must have been terrifying. Chen's laugh was bitter. Terror is watching your father's memorial service and knowing his killers are still out there. Syria was just business. 12 kills is a lot of business. Hassan al-Rashid had 11 men working for him. The 12th was the source inside American intelligence who sold out my father's team. Chen's voice remained steady, but Tank could see her knuckles whiten as she gripped her rifle. It took 4 months to identify them all and 3 weeks to eliminate them. How? Carefully. Car bombs, sniper fire, knife work when necessary. Each death had to look like part of the ongoing civil war. No connections. No patterns that would point back to American involvement. Tank tried to imagine a 17-year-old girl systematically hunting and killing trained terrorists in one of the world's most dangerous war zones. It should have been impossible. The source? Colonel Marcus Webb, U.S. Army Intelligence. He was feeding information to al-Rashid in exchange for money and safe passage for arms dealers he was working with. He died in a car accident in Germany 2 weeks after I returned to the States. You killed an American colonel? Chen met his eyes directly. I did what was necessary to ensure that no other families would suffer what mine did. Tank was quiet for a long moment, processing what he'd heard. Sarah Chen had conducted a one-person war of retribution at an age when most people were worried about prom dates and college applications. Why join the Navy? Why not stay with private contractors? Because revenge is a dead end, Chief. After I killed the last man on my list, I realized I had a choice. I could keep killing people for money, or I could use what I'd learned to protect others. The Navy gave me a chance to serve something bigger than my own anger. Do you regret it? Any of it? Chen shouldered her rifle and looked out across the desert training range. I regret that it was necessary, but I don't regret doing it. Tank stood up and brushed dust off his uniform. Chen, in 2 weeks we're deploying to Syria. There's a good chance we'll be operating in some of the same areas where you worked 8 years ago. I need to know if there's anything from your past that could compromise the mission. My legend is solid, Chief. Sarah Kowalski died in a car accident in Oregon 7 years ago. Sarah Chen is clean. What about enemies? People who might recognize you? Chen smiled for the first time since Tank had known her. It wasn't a pleasant expression. Chief, anyone who knew Sarah Kowalski well enough to recognize Sarah Chen is dead. I made sure of that. As they walked back toward the barracks, Tank found himself reassessing everything about his upcoming deployment. He'd thought he was taking a green sniper to Syria. Instead, he'd be deploying with a ghost who knew the country better than most intelligence officers and had already proven she was willing to do whatever it took to complete a mission. The question now was whether Sarah Chen's past would be an asset or a liability when they found themselves in harm's way. Tank had a feeling he'd find out soon enough. Chen? Yes, Chief? When we get to Syria, I want you to brief the team on everything you know about the area. Everything. Roger that, Chief. Tank watched her walk away, noting the confident stride and perfect posture of someone who'd learned to be dangerous in the world's most dangerous places. His sniper section had just gotten a lot more lethal. 2 weeks later, Tank found himself on a C-130 transport aircraft flying over the Mediterranean Sea towards Syria. The cargo bay was filled with 12 SEALs, their equipment, and enough ammunition to fight a small war. Chen sat near the rear of the plane, her Barrett case secured beside her, studying satellite photos of their target area. The mission was straightforward on paper. Insert into northern Syria, locate and extract a captured CIA officer, and get out before anyone noticed they'd been there. In reality, Tank knew it would be anything but simple. Syrian government forces, Russian advisors, ISIS remnants, and Kurdish militias all operated in their target area. It was a powder keg waiting for someone to light the fuse. "Chen, up here," Tank called over the engine noise. She made her way forward, moving easily despite the aircraft's constant motion. The other team members watched her with professional interest. Word had spread that their new sniper had some kind of special background, but Tank had kept the details classified. "Show me what you know about this area," Tank said, spreading a detailed map across the equipment case. Chen studied the map for a moment, then began pointing to specific locations. "This village was controlled by al-Rashid's people 8 years ago. If it's the same group, they'll have sentries here, here, and here." She marked positions with a pencil. The mosque was used as an arms cache, and they kept prisoners in the basement of this building. Petty Officer Jake Morrison, the team's communications specialist, leaned in closer. "How do you know all this?" "I've been there before," Chen replied simply. "When?" "A long time ago." Tank could see Morrison wanted to ask more questions, but the look on Tank's face shut down that line of inquiry. The less the team knew about Chen's past, the better. "What about escape routes?" Tank asked. Chen traced a path on the map with her finger. "There's a wadi system here that runs north for about 3 kilometers. It's deep enough to hide vehicles and leads to an old goat path up into the hills. From there you can reach the Turkish border in about 6 hours on foot." "You've used this route before?" "Yes." Tank folded the map and looked around at his team. "Listen up. Chen has operational experience in this area. Her intel will be treated as gospel until proven otherwise." "Questions?" There were none, but Tank could see the curiosity in his operator's eyes. Having a team member with prior experience in the target area was unusual, especially someone as young as Chen. 4 hours later, they were on the ground in Syria. The helicopter had dropped them in a valley 10 kilometers from their target, and they'd humped their gear through rocky terrain under a moonless sky. Chen moved point, her familiarity with the area evident in every step. Tank watched her work with professional admiration. She navigated by memory and instinct, avoiding paths that would have been obvious choices to someone working from satellite images alone. When she held up a closed fist to signal a halt, the entire team froze instantly. "Patrol," she whispered into her radio. 4 men, moving south to north about 200 meters ahead. Tank crawled up beside her and raised his night vision scope. Sure enough, 4 armed figures were picking their way through the rocks, following what looked like a regular patrol route. "How did you know they'd be here?" "They always patrol this area at this time. Some things never change." The patrol passed without detecting them, and the team continued toward their objective. As they crested a ridge overlooking their target village, Chen motioned for Tank to join her behind a large boulder. "Chief, we have a problem." Tank looked through his binoculars at the village below. What should have been a sleepy farming community was clearly a military installation. Guard towers, razor wire, and at least 50 armed men were visible even in the darkness. "This isn't in any of our intelligence reports." "Because it's new. Someone's turned this place into a fortress since our satellite photos were taken." Chen was already setting up her Barrett, adjusting the scope for the distance to target. "Chief, I need to tell you something." "The man we're here to extract?" "I know who's holding him." Tank felt his stomach drop. "Who?" "Khalil al-Rashid, Hassan's younger brother. He took over the cell after Hassan died." "You killed his brother?" "Yes." Tank stared at her. "Chen, why didn't you tell me this before we left?" "Because you wouldn't have brought me if you'd known. And right now I'm the only person on this team who knows how Khalil thinks, how he operates, and where he's likely keeping our target." Through his scope, Tank could see movement in the village. Vehicles arriving, men with weapons setting up defensive positions. It was clear that their mission had been compromised before they'd even started. "How do you want to play this, Chief?" Morrison's voice crackled over the radio. Tank looked at Chen, who was studying the village through her rifle scope with the intensity of a hunting cat. "Chen, if Khalil is down there, will he recognize you?" "Not likely. I was heavily disguised during my time here, and it's been 8 years. But if he figures out who I am," she let the sentence hang, "what happens? He'll kill the hostage just to hurt me. Then he'll come after us with everything he has." Tank considered their options. They could abort the mission and call for an airstrike, but that would likely kill the CIA officer they were supposed to rescue. They could try to call in reinforcements, but that would take hours they didn't have. Or they could trust Chen's knowledge and try to complete the mission despite the complications. "Chen, I need an honest assessment. Can we get our man out?" She was quiet for a long moment, studying the village layout through her scope. "Yes, but it's going to be messy. Khalil's probably keeping the prisoner in the same building his brother used, the one with the basement I mentioned. Getting in won't be the problem. Getting out alive will be." Tank made his decision. "Morrison, get me a comms link to base. I need to update them on the situation." "Roger, Chief." While Morrison worked on communications, Tank pulled Chen aside. "I need to know everything about Khalil al-Rashid. Everything. He's smarter than his brother was, but more emotional." Hassan was methodical, calculating. "Khalil is passionate, which makes him dangerous but also predictable. He has a weakness for elaborate revenge scenarios. He won't just kill an enemy, he'll make them suffer first, which might keep our CIA officer alive longer than we'd expect." "Exactly. But Chief, if Khalil realizes who I am, this mission becomes personal for him. He's been hunting for his brother's killer for 8 years. Tank looked down at the fortified village, then back at Chen. "Are you ready to face him?" Chen's smile was cold and professional. "I've been ready for 8 years. As Tank watched her check her rifle one final time, he realized that their mission had just transformed from a simple extraction to a deadly game of cat and mouse. Sarah Chen was about to come face to face with the brother of a man she'd killed, in the same country where she'd learned to become a professional killer. The question now was whether Chen's past would help them save the CIA officer, or whether it would get them all killed in the process. Tank's earpiece crackled with static as Morrison established contact with their command base. The response wasn't what he'd hoped for. "Razor Team, this is Control. Intelligence confirms your target is CIA officer David Brennan, captured 4 days ago. High priority extraction. Mission is still green light despite increased security." Tank looked at Chen, who was methodically checking her equipment with the calm efficiency of someone preparing for war. "Control. This is Razor Actual. Security situation has changed significantly. Estimate 50+ hostiles, fortified positions, and personal complications. Razor Actual, clarify personal complications." Tank hesitated. How could he explain that his sniper had a history with the target commander without revealing classified information over an open channel? "Control. One of my operators has prior experience with hostile commander. Could affect mission dynamics." "Understood, Razor Actual. Mission remains priority 1. CIA officer has intelligence that cannot fall into hostile hands." "How copy?" "Solid copy, Control. Razor Actual out." Tank turned to his team, who had formed a defensive perimeter while maintaining visual on the village below. "Gentlemen, we're going to modify our approach. Chen, brief them on the target building layout." Chen moved to the center of their position, sketching in the sand with a knife blade. "The building where they're holding our target is here, about 200 meters from the village center. It's an old merchant's house, stone construction, 2 stories above ground with a basement level." She drew lines indicating walls and passages. "Main entrance here, service entrance on the north side, and a window access point on the 2nd floor. The basement has one way in and out through an interior staircase." Petty Officer Tommy Rodriguez raised his hand. "How do you know all this?" Chen met his gaze steadily. "Because I've been inside that building before." "When you were 17, Tank added, seeing the questions forming in his team's minds. "Chen conducted intelligence operations in this area several years ago. That's all anyone needs to know." The team exchanged glances but accepted the explanation. Special operations attracted people with unique backgrounds, and they'd all worked with operators who had classified histories. "Chen, what's the most likely scenario for getting inside?" Tank asked. "Khalil will have guards at the main entrance and roving patrols around the perimeter. The service entrance is usually unguarded but locked from the inside. The window access requires climbing, which makes extraction difficult." She paused, studying her drawing. "But there's another option. The old merchant who built that house was paranoid about thieves. He installed a hidden entrance through a false wall in the shop next door. If it hasn't been discovered, we could get in without triggering any alarms. Tank nodded. Best estimate on guard strength inside the building? 4 to 6 men. Khalil keeps the important prisoners lightly guarded inside because the building itself is secure. He prefers to concentrate his security on the perimeter. Morrison looked up from his radio equipment. Chief, I'm monitoring their communications. Lots of chatter about increased security, but no mention of expecting trouble. Looks like they don't know we're here yet. How's your Arabic? Tank asked Chen, fluent. I can understand everything they're saying. Tank made his decision. Here's how we play it. Chen and I go in through the hidden entrance. Morrison and Rodriguez set up overwatch positions here and here. He pointed to elevated positions that would give them clear fields of fire. The rest of the team forms a security perimeter and prepares for rapid exfiltration. Chief, Chen said quietly, there's something else you need to know. If this goes wrong and Khalil captures any of us, especially me, he won't just kill us. He'll make an example out of us that will be broadcast across every terrorist network in the region. Meaning we don't get captured alive. The grim reality of their situation settled over the team. They were outnumbered, operating in hostile territory, and about to infiltrate a position held by someone with a personal vendetta against one of their operators. Any objections to the plan? Tank asked. There were none. These were professional warriors who understood the risks and had volunteered for missions exactly like this one. 30 minutes later, Tank and Chen were making their way down the hill toward the village. They moved in 30-second bounds, one covering while the other advanced using every piece of cover available in the rocky terrain. As they reached the edge of the village, Chen held up a closed fist. Through her night vision, Tank could see a sentry walking a patrol route between two buildings. Chen was already moving, drawing a knife from her belt. She flowed across the open space like a shadow, coming up behind the sentry with lethal silence. Tank watched as she applied a blood choke, lowering the unconscious man to the ground without making a sound. Clear, her voice whispered in his earpiece. They reached the shop building without further incident. Chen led him around to what appeared to be a solid stone wall, but her hands found hidden handholds that allowed her to climb to a window that looked like it hadn't been opened in years. This is it, she whispered, working at the window latch with a multi-tool. The window opened silently on hinges that Chen had apparently oiled years before. They dropped into a storage room that smelled of dust and abandonment. Chen moved to what looked like a solid wall and began pressing specific stones in a pattern. After a moment, a section of the wall swung inward on hidden hinges, revealing a narrow passage that led into the merchant's house next door. Stay close and step where I step, Chen whispered. The floor has weak spots that creak. They moved through the passage, emerging into what had once been a kitchen. The house was dark except for light coming from upstairs and the sound of voices speaking Arabic. Chen held up 3 fingers indicating she could hear 3 distinct voices. Tank activated his throat mic. Overwatch, this is Razor Actual. We're inside the target building. 3 hostiles confirmed on upper level. Copy, Razor Actual. We have visual on external security. No movement toward your position. Chen led Tank to a doorway that opened onto a staircase leading down, the basement entrance. As they descended, the sound of voices faded, replaced by something that made Tank's blood run cold, the sound of someone groaning in pain. At the bottom of the stairs, they found themselves in a stone-walled basement lit by a single hanging bulb. In the far corner, a man was chained to the wall. Even in the dim light, Tank could see he'd been beaten severely. CIA officer David Brennan? Tank whispered. The man's head lifted slowly. Who are you? U.S. Navy. We're here to get you out. While Tank worked on Brennan's chains with bolt cutters, Chen positioned herself at the bottom of the stairs, listening for any sound from above. How many are up there? Brennan asked, his voice barely audible. 3 that we can confirm, Tank replied. Can you walk? I think so. They've been questioning me for 4 days. Haven't broken anything vital yet. Tank helped Brennan to his feet. The CIA officer was wobbly but mobile. What did you tell them? Nothing important, but they're getting more aggressive. The leader, Khalil, he's planning something big, some kind of attack on American forces. Chen's voice cut through their conversation. We need to move now. I can hear vehicles approaching. Tank activated his radio. Overwatch report. Morrison's voice crackled back immediately. Razor actual, multiple vehicles approaching from the south. Estimate 20 to 30 additional hostiles inbound. You've got maybe 3 minutes before they arrive. Copy. Beginning exfiltration now. Tank helped Brennan up the stairs while Chen covered their rear. They reached the kitchen without incident, but as they approached the hidden passage, footsteps pounded on the floor above them. They know we're here, Chen said. Someone must have found the unconscious sentry. The sound of boots on stairs echoed through the house. Chen grabbed Tank's arm. Chief, take Brennan through the passage. I'll buy you time. Negative. We go together. Chief, listen to me. If Khalil gets down here and sees me, he'll forget about everything else. The mission, the prisoner, the attack he's planning. He'll focus entirely on killing me. That gives you the best chance of getting Brennan out alive. Tank wanted to argue, but the sound of approaching footsteps was getting louder. Chen was right, splitting up was their best tactical option. 2 minutes, Tank said. Then we're coming back for you. Don't get Brennan to the exfiltration point. I'll find another way out. Tank helped Brennan through the hidden passage as Chen took position at the bottom of the stairs. The last thing he saw before the wall closed was Chen checking her sidearm and preparing to face whatever was coming down those stairs. As Tank and Brennan made their way through the passage, gunfire erupted behind them. The distinctive crack of Chen's pistol mixed with the heavier reports of assault rifles. Tank counted the shots automatically. Chen had fired 6 rounds, meaning she'd engaged at least 3 targets. They emerged from the building through the window they'd entered. Tank helping the injured CIA officer down to ground level. Morrison's voice was urgent in his earpiece. Razor actual, the whole village is lighting up. We've got hostiles moving toward your position from multiple directions. 6 hours later, Tank sat in a helicopter crossing into Turkish airspace with David Brennan, sleeping fitfully beside him. The CIA officer had been treated by their corpsman and was stable, but Tank's mind was focused on the empty seat where Sarah Chen should have been sitting. His radio had been silent since her last transmission. Either she was maintaining communication discipline or she was dead. Neither possibility sat well with Tank. Chief, Morrison said over the engine noise. I've been monitoring Syrian military frequencies. There's a lot of chatter about a terrorist compound that got hit by unknown forces. Sounds like someone did a number on Khalil's operation. Tank nodded but didn't respond. Chen had said she'd find another way out, but Syria was a big country full of people who wanted Americans dead. Even someone with her skills could only survive so long alone in hostile territory. As they approached the American base in Turkey, Tank's secure satellite phone rang. The caller ID showed a number he didn't recognize. Rodriguez, Chief, it's me. Chen's voice was clear but tired. Where the hell are you? About 50 kilometers inside Turkey. Hitching a ride with some very helpful Kurdish smugglers. I should be back at base in a few hours. Tank felt a weight lift off his shoulders. What happened after we left? Khalil came down to the basement with 8 men. When he saw the empty chains, he went absolutely insane. Started screaming about ghosts and revenge. Made it pretty easy to predict what he'd do next. Which was? Split his forces to search the village. I waited until they were spread out, then started picking them off one by one. Old-fashioned guerrilla tactics. Tank could hear the exhaustion in her voice, but also something else. Satisfaction, maybe, or closure. How many? Khalil and 11 of his men won't be terrorizing anyone else. The rest scattered when they realized they were being hunted by someone who knew the area better than they did. Tank was quiet for a moment. Chen had single-handedly eliminated a terrorist cell that had been operating in the region for years. Chen, when you get back, we're going to have a long debriefing session. Looking forward to it. Chief? The line went dead, leaving Tank to wonder what other surprises Sarah Chen might have in store. She'd proven herself in combat, but she'd also demonstrated a capacity for violence that went beyond normal military operations. 3 days later, Tank was sitting in a secure briefing room at the Naval Special Warfare Base in Virginia Beach. Across from him sat Admiral Patricia Hayes, the commander of all SEAL operations on the East Coast. Between them lay a stack of classified reports detailing their Syrian mission. Chief Rodriguez, your mission report makes for interesting reading, especially the parts about Petty Officer Chen. Yes, ma'am. 12 confirmed kills in a single engagement. No American casualties. CIA officer successfully extracted with valuable intelligence. I'd call that a textbook operation except for one thing. Tank waited. Chen's background report raises some questions. According to her file, she's never seen combat before. Yet she performed like a seasoned special operations veteran. Ma'am, Chen has some unique qualifications that aren't reflected in her standard personnel record. Admiral Hayes leaned back in her chair. Chief, I've been in this business for 25 years. I know the difference between someone who learned to fight in training and someone who learned to fight for real. Chen learned for real, didn't she? Yes, ma'am. Care to elaborate? Tank had been dreading this conversation. Chen's classified background meant that even his commanding officer might not have the clearance to know the full story. Ma'am, Chen conducted intelligence operations in Syria several years ago, under different authorities. Her experience proved invaluable to mission success. Admiral Hayes picked up a folder that Tank hadn't noticed before. I've been briefed by some very serious people about Petty Officer Chen. Seems she has friends in high places who are very interested in her career. She opened the folder and Tank caught a glimpse of CIA letterhead. Chief, I'm going to ask you a direct question, and I want a direct answer. Is Sarah Chen an asset or a liability to your team? Tank thought about everything he'd learned about Chen. Her skills, her past, her willingness to sacrifice herself for the mission. The way she'd saved their entire operation by staying behind to face Khalil. Ma'am, Chen is the most capable operator I've ever worked with. If I had to choose one person to have my back in a firefight, it would be her. Even knowing what you know about her background, especially knowing what I know about her background. Admiral Hayes closed the folder and smiled for the first time since Tank had entered the room. Good answer, Chief. Because I have another mission for your team, and specifically for Petty Officer Chen. It seems there are some people in the intelligence community who would like to borrow her services for a little while. Tank felt his stomach drop. Ma'am? Relax, Chief, she'll still be part of your team. But Chen's unique qualifications make her perfect for some specialized work. Think of it as cross-training with other agencies. As Tank left the briefing room, his mind was racing. Sarah Chen had gone from being a mysterious new team member to a government asset in the span of 2 weeks. He wondered what other secrets she might be carrying and what kind of missions they'd be tasked with next. One thing was certain, serving with Sarah Chen was never going to be boring. That evening, Tank found Chen on the base shooting range, working through drills with her Barrett rifle. Even after everything they'd been through, she still practiced with the dedication of someone who knew that in their line of work, there was no such thing as good enough. Chen, evening. Chief, we need to talk. She saved her weapon and turned to face him. About Syria or about what comes next? You know about the new assignment? I figured it was coming. People like me don't get to retire from the life, Chief. We just get recycled into new missions. Tank studied her face, looking for any sign of resentment or fatigue. What he saw was acceptance and professional determination. Any regrets? Chen looked out across the range, where targets stood silhouetted against the setting sun. About Syria? No. Khalil needed to be stopped, and his operation was planning something that would have killed a lot of innocent people. She paused, shouldering her rifle. About joining your team? None at all, Chief. For the first time in 8 years, I feel like I'm part of something that matters. As Tank watched her walk back toward the barracks, he realized that Sarah Chen had found what she'd been looking for when she joined the Navy. Not redemption for her past, but a purpose for her future. She was no longer the 17-year-old girl who'd gone to Syria seeking revenge. She was a professional warrior who'd learned to use her deadly skills in service of something bigger than herself. Tank was proud to have her on his team. The Barrett 50 caliber rifle case sat on the armory table, its contents cleaned and ready for the next mission. Whatever that mission might be, Tank knew that Sarah Chen would be ready for it. After all, she was a ghost who'd learned to live again,